to RodneyABrooks.com. Today we're talking to America's foremost expert on IRAs. The Wall Street Journal and USA Today have both named him the best source for IRA advice. Welcome, Ed Slott.
Well, great to be here, Rodney. Thanks for having me on.
Okay. Ed is president and CEO of Ed Slott and Company. And he's also written a new book. I don't know how many books you've written. I know you've written a bunch of them.
A bunch, yes, enough.
But the newest one is called The New Retirement Savings Time Bomb. And it's about tax implications, correct?
It's all about the taxes. The taxes will determine how much of your retirement savings you actually get to keep. Most people think it's theirs. Can you imagine?
Yes. Well, so let's talk about that for a minute because people save money in these tax deferred accounts, 401ks and IRAs, and somehow they forget that they haven't paid taxes on it. Is that one of the biggest mistakes you're talking about?
Oh, yeah. People think the money, for years I had clients, they were so happy. They said, look at that. I've got 300,000 or even 1 million in some cases. Look at, but they would show me their statement. Look at this. I have 300,000 in my IRA. And I would say, what are you looking at? That's not your money. It's just temporarily on your letterhead. You may not be keeping a lot of that money, maybe even half of it. You mean only half is mine? and you hit it on the head, Rodney.
So that means people are planning. They're planning incorrectly because they're planning, thinking they have more money to spend in retirement than they actually do.
Right. That's because we all made what I call the tax deal with the devil many years ago. And as with any deal with the devil, there's a day of what? A day of reckoning, payback time. And with IRAs, at some point, you have to take the money out. That's called the required beginning date. That's when our government basically determined that, look, we're sick and tired of waiting for you to drop dead and we want our money back. That's it. And at 72, that's the new age, it has to start coming out the other way and be taxed. That was the deal that we all made because that was the only deal available. We got these tax deductions up front. Some people forget they get those tax benefits all those years. It's almost every time you take a tax benefit, a deduction, it's an IOU to Uncle Sam. That's really what it is. It's a loan. Every time you take a tax deduction, if you thought about it that way, it's like adding to the mortgage on your IRA. Now, Rodney, you hit the perfect term. These are tax deferred accounts. That's way different than tax free. And that could be a huge difference. And that big difference comes down to one little 3-letter word, yet, Y-E-T. Tax deferred means you won't pay taxes on that money yet, but you will at some future time, maybe on a higher balance, maybe even at a higher rate, as opposed to tax-free, which means you'll never pay taxes on that money. That's where you want to be, but that's not where most people are. Most people have most of their savings for retirement in either an IRA, tax deferred, in other words, all taxable when you take it out, or a 401k taxable, or a 403b taxable, or maybe a 457 taxable, because that's how we were brought up. That was the only option. So now many of the people like at my age in the baby boomer years are coming up maybe on retirement or on that magic age, 72, where the train has to stop and go the other way. Then you go from accumulating to taking the money out. Forced distributions, whether you need it or not. And that's when the tax hits. And that's why I call my book The New Retirement Savings Time Bomb. I'm talking about the ticking tax time bomb. Say that 3 times fast, Rodney. The ticking tax time bomb in your tax deferred, in your IRA or 401k. That growing, building, compounding debt that gets worse every day that goes by. In fact, you've seen the stock market going crazy every year or the last year. Every time it goes up, that's more money, yes, for you, but also more money for Uncle Sam. And I don't know if you realize this, he's not even your real uncle. But yet he still gets a big share of the check. So you have to do something about it. Or otherwise, you get what I call the government plan. So I say in my programs, in my books, you want your plan, not the government plan. And then people ask me, Ed, what's the government plan? Well, that's simple. That's doing absolutely nothing and letting it all happen to you. That's how you lose chunks of the money you save for retirement. You want to be proactive. So I'm glad to be on this program talking about that big tax problem, the growing, building, ticking tax time bomb in your retirement account.
Now one of the reasons people liked tax deferred or were pushed to tax deferred is there was this I don't know if it was true or not. Maybe it was true back then, but people um, were expected to earn less. Sometimes they said 80% of what they earned in that basically their incomes would be down, so they could actually take their withdrawals and and takes the tax hits. Now these days that's not so true anymore, is it?
No, I think that was always more of a myth because it made sense to people. When I stop working, my income will be lower. So it's good that I took the tax deductions because when I pay it back, I'll be in a lower bracket. Not so, because the more you have, actually, the more you've saved in your retirement account, the larger those RMDs, required minimum distributions, you're forced to take will be. And I've seen lots of people over the years that used to come in when I did. I'm a CPA, but I don't, have my practice anymore. I got rid of that a few years ago. I do mostly advisor training and consumer programs, as you said, like we're doing now. But I had clients over the year that would come in for their taxes and they would say, how is this possible? I'm retired. My income is now higher than my best earnings years. How I'm not working. How can this be possible? Well, a lifetime spent of working, earning, building, saving, investing, and now being forced to take that money out. And what may happen is you may be in a higher bracket, but this is for everybody to determine on their own. There may truly be people that will do believe they'll be in a lower bracket in retirement, and maybe that's the case. But that's something you should look at. Uh, each person is different based on the resources they have available.
Okay, let's talk about RMD, required minimum distributions, because that's one thing that can actually push you into a higher tax bracket. Is that a surprise to people?
Yeah, that does push you. It not only push you into a higher bracket, but it generates what accountants like me call stealth taxes. You ever hear that term, Rodney? Stealth taxes? These are increases in other taxes that are a direct effect of your income going up. It's basically the loss of tax benefits, deductions, credits. For example, more of your Social Security may be taxable. Your Medicare surcharges may go up for parts B and D because your income was higher. You may not be able to take as much in medical deductions because it's based on a percentage of income. Certain tax credits and other deductions could be limited or eliminated because your income spiked and went up. So it's not just the RMDs, it's kind of the side effects, the tax ripple effects of that. And even back on the other item you asked me about, the myth that will I be in a lower bracket in retirement? For married couples, this is a little sneaky. I said maybe a married couple feels like, you know what? I think we will be in a lower bracket in retirement. We won't have that much in resources. The key word there is we. I think we'll be in a lower bracket. With any married couple, I'll make a bold prediction. One spouse is going to die first. When that first spouse dies, then the second spouse, most people leave their IRAs to their husband or wife, their spouse. So let's take an example. The husband dies, he leaves his IRA and all his property to his spouse, his wife. Now, after the husband dies, and they may have had lower income in a lower bracket in retirement. Now he dies. The wife now has all the assets and the income, other than the adjustment maybe for a Social Security check difference. But other than that, the wife now has all basically the same income they both had when he was alive, except now her tax rate goes through the roof because now she's filing as single. Most people don't think that far beyond. So they think we'll be in a lower tax bracket. I call this whole scenario the widow's penalty. And I talk about it in my book, the kind of sneaky one, because when that wife inherits, the RMDs are going to be the same amount, but she'll be at a much higher bracket, a much higher tax on the same income. That's a big tax trap.
That is so let's talk about Ross now because there are so many people who did not know about Ross and now you hear about Ross and it takes some money to convert your traditional to a Roth, which may be but I guess we should start out. Let's start out basically explaining a Roth and why you think that's good and or bad and when you should start investing in a Roth.
Well, I think it's good. I'm way biased. First of all, I don't sell any products. I'm a CPA, a tax advisor. I don't sell any stocks, bonds, funds, insurance, annuities. I'm a tax advisor. But so everything I'm telling you, I'm glad to tell you that it's independent, unbiased, objective. But I do have one bias, a bias against taxes. I love tax free. Anything tax free, I go for. And the Roth is an account that can get you there. It's almost like the anti-IRA. Everything we just talked about with the IRA and 401k, yes, you've got all those deductions up front, and that money's gone. Now it's payback time. The Roth works differently. The Roth, the money goes in, already taxed money goes in. You don't receive a deduction. But in retirement, those funds can be withdrawn tax and penalty free in retirement. So now the minute it goes to a Roth, this is why I love Roths. In fact, in my book, I have a whole chapter, I call it Congress's single greatest gift. And I'm pretty tough on Congress in this book, but I have to give it to them there. Creating a tax-free retirement account. Can you imagine, Rodney, if you or I were able like to start in our first job at age 15 or 17, whatever it was, to start growing a retirement account absolutely tax-free from the ground up, from $1? We didn't have that ability, but young people do today. They have the ability to build their retirement savings absolutely tax-free by walking away from the deduction. It's not worth as much. But people like us that already have a lot of money, well, not me, because everything I'm telling you, I was going to say have a lot of money in IRAs. I don't have any. I usually don't share what I have in my IRA, but for your audience, I will, Rodney. I'll give you the balance in my traditional IRA. Zero. Because I converted everything back in 2010 when they lifted the income limitations. If you remember, before 2010, if your income exceeded 100,000, you were not even eligible to convert. But right. Now anyone can convert. So I took that deal in 2010, converted everything. So I drink my own Kool-Aid, so to speak. You know what I mean, Robbie? So I do have a bias. Why did I do that? Why did I pay all that tax? Because you said it correctly. That's the stumbling block. People don't want to pay the tax up front. But what you hit on there, Rodney, and this is what my book looks like, but I'm going to give you the secret to this book. You know how some books, Rodney, they tell you there's a secret, but you have to wait till the end of the book, or they tell it to you at the end of the chapter, or some books make you figure it out on your own. They say you have to figure it out on your own. One of my favorite books that I read quite a bit, they make you do that. The old book, which I was introduced to in college and still read, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And if you know that book, he tells you in every chapter, there's a secret there, how to get rich, but he never tells you because he says you have to figure it out for yourself. So anybody buying Think and Grow Rich, I'm going to give you the secret right now. So you have to buy. All right. Anything the mind can conceive, you can achieve. That's it. That's the secret to Think and Grow Rich. There are no limitations on you. Anything that's up here, you can put out there if you believe in it and you're driven and you take action. All right, the secret to my book is exactly what Rodney said. The problem with my book, it's counterintuitive. It doesn't make sense, the secret. The way to have more of your money in retirement, more of it for you, and more of it tax-free, and more tax-free for your beneficiaries. In other words, the way to have more, keep more, and make it last. The secret is pay taxes now, up front. What? What kind of secret is that? If I pay taxes, I have less the minute the check leaves my hand. You're not thinking long term. That's the secret. You get something for your money. You get tax freedom. It's kind of like paying off a mortgage on your home. I remember this. This is still a big deal. But I remember growing up. Well, I don't remember when my father bought our house, but I was told in 1957, when I was 3 years old, he bought our first house, our only house we ever had, for $12,000, actually $16,000. He took a $4,000 mortgage on a $16,000 house, 30-year mortgage. He took a $12,000 mortgage. He put $4,000 down. He took a $12,000 30-year mortgage on that house in 1957. But I do remember in 1987, when he finally paid it off 30 years later, it took him the full 30 years to pay off that $12,000 mortgage. Well, I got to tell you, paying off a mortgage back in the day on your home was a big, big deal.
Yes,
He was so happy and proud to own his own home free and clear, finally. In fact, back then, you might have remembered, and I still don't get this as a CPA, they had mortgage burning parties. You ever hear of that?
yes, yes.
Yeah. Why would you burn the only documentation that proves you don't owe money? I never got that. But anyway, that's how happy they were not to have any debt, to pay off their mortgage on their home. I mention this because that's the secret to paying off the mortgage, that growing building debt in your IRA. The minute you pay that off by paying some tax up front, now, the minute you do that, everything grows 100% tax-free for you for the rest of your life. Every gain, you keep 100%. No sharing with Uncle Sam anymore. It's all yours. And even after the Secure Act, it can go to your children and grandchildren 10 more years, all tax-free. So you get something for your money. That's the secret to this book, to get rid of that growing building debt in your IRA. And that may mean paying some tax. It will mean paying some tax now to get rid of that mortgage, so you can feel like my dad felt when he finally owned his own home free and clear. Now, today, many people's IRAs and 401ks is larger than the value of their home, maybe their largest single asset. So they focus on loving to have their home free and clear, but they never think of their largest single asset being free and clear. Once that albatross, that tax albatross, is off the back of your IRA, then you'll see big money growth, because it all will accumulate for you, tax-free forever. But you have to bite the bullet up front. If you think about it, anything good in life you pay for up front. It's always the bad things that cost more later on. It reminds me, do you remember that old Midas muffler commercial
Yes.
years ago? Do you remember the tagline with the mechanic? He would say, pay me now, or what? Pay me later. There was a big Midas muffler. It was a great ad. It ran, I think, in the 60s, 70s or something. And it always stuck with me. It's the same thing here. Remember, the tax in your IRA, not paying tax now, doesn't mean it goes away. It just gets worse. This is why I invest heavily in my dentist. Why? I love root canals. Why do I like root canals? Because I get rid of the pain, so I won't have it the rest of my life. I'm past root canals now. Now I'm into implants, getting rid of all my teeth. I want to get rid of the problem. It's the same thing. My dentist has a sign in her office. She says, ignore your teeth and they will go away. Ignore your retirement account. It will go away too, as it's constantly being eroded by taxes, whether you pay them not now or not. They will still be owed. So it's not if, but when. And the foundational principle of all good tax planning, and that's what all this is about, is to always pay taxes at the lowest rates. That
Now,
may be right now.
okay, right. And okay, so
That's the secret. I gave away the secret to the whole book. You hit it.
but so one thing I want to touch on is basically people think about converting a Roth and they think about basically how much it will cost, but they don't think about that they don't have to do it all at the same time. I
Right.
mean,
That's a good
right.
point. Yeah, it's not all or nothing. Probably the best course of action, like anything in life, is moderation. Probably a best course of action is to do something, not let it sit there and grow. Burying your head in the sand is not going to make the problem go away. It reminds me of that old saying by Henny Youngman. He says, "When I read about the evils of drinking, I gave up reading." That will not make the problem go away. But maybe the best course of action is to start a series of smaller annual conversions. So over time, you're taking that tax debt down on your IRA and building tax-free savings in retirement that will grow 100% for you. Have a plan, do a little each year to use the benefit of the low tax rates. Because this money, if you ignore it, it will be subject to future higher taxes. So you get something for your money. That is the secret, to be able to pay some tax now, to have more later and more of it tax free.
Okay, now let's for a minute because I talked to a financial advisor who says um, actually from his point of view, you're not like the most CPAs because he says when it comes to tax planning, CPAs generally want their clients to take the deduction as opposed to the financial advisor who want them to pay the taxes for a long-term benefit. So when it comes to young people, let's say young people who are starting out, okay, how do they, determine whether it's worth it for them to take the deduction and take the tax deferred uh, um, way as opposed to the Roth, and it's especially when it comes to 401ks because 401ks are now in a lot more workplace plans than they were, and still people are not taking advantage of the Roth 401k as they should, from what I hear.
Right. All right. So let's go back to what you said about CPAs, which I'm one. But the difference between me and most other CPAs, I'm a recovering CPA. Uh, we were taught as a going through accounting in the first day of college, your first accounting class, everyone studying accounting that would eventually become a CPA. It was drummed into us, hardwired. Never, ever pay a tax before you have to. Always put it off. Always defer, defer, defer. In fact, if when you were a kid and your mother told you to do something and you said, "Not now, Ma, I'll do it later," you would have become an accountant because you were trained to defer, to put things off. But I realized putting things off could create a bigger problem later on. And that's the tax time bomb I write about in my book. Just burying your head in the sand is not going to make it go away. So now to the young people, this one's easy. For anybody, and here you're going to like this. Who do I consider young? Anybody in their 50s or younger, okay? But especially those new workers coming into the workforce in their 20s and 30s. This is a slam dunk. Only do the Roth. Do not fall for that deduction. You'll get a deduction. It may reduce your taxes somewhat. But again, what did I say before? Every time you take a deduction, look at the other side of the ledger. That's money you will owe. That's like borrowing money from the bank, except it's worse than a bank. You're borrowing from the IRS and essentially borrowing from the whim of Congress that could make the rates anything they want. See, if you go in for a mortgage, imagine you went in for a mortgage on your home. You went with the bank. This is why I say it's worse than the bank. Let's say you're shopping for a mortgage and you did all your homework. You know the rates, the repayment terms, the interest rate, and all the factors. And you go in and you're all prepared, right? You got all your numbers and everything, and you walk into the bank And the bank, and you show them, you show the bank officer, the loan officer, all your paperwork. And he said, pushes it away. And he says, don't worry about that. Here's the money. What? What's the interest rate? Don't worry about it. When we need the money, we'll tell you what the interest rate is. Well, who would take that deal? Everybody with an IRA or 401k took that deal. That's exactly how an IRA works. The government says when we need the money, then we'll tell you what the rate is. So it's an open-ended rate. At least with a bank, you know what the monthly payment is. If you want to know how much you owe on your home mortgage, you look at the statement. It tells you. If you want to know how much you owe on your IRA, there's no statement. It's just a projection of what future tax rates can be. So the deduction is worthless the younger you are, because again, the key to tax planning is always paying taxes at the lowest rates. Or to put it another way, take deductions when your rates are the highest, take the income when your rates are the lowest. For most people entering the workforce, I have to assume, other than certain go-getter exceptions, most people are at the lower end of their earnings years. So the deductions are at lower brackets. They're not worth as much, only to build that loan that will come due 40 years later at your highest earning years. So you have to look long term. So for any young person, here's my, for like the millennials, like my kids, for example, here's my advice. Stop taking pictures of your food and open a Roth IRA. My kids are constantly sending me these, text pictures of their food. And then, and I like to be polite. So, then you have to answer, oh, very nice. I'm so proud. What am I going to do? You got to answer it. Otherwise, they think you ignored them. Very touchy. So that's my advice. Open a Roth IRA. All young people do Roth IRAs at work. Like you said, Rodney, if they offer the Roth 401k option, take that deal. That means all your money will grow tax-free forever. What are you giving up? More of your income will be taxable, but at lower rates over time, especially in your early earnings years. And the reward is the minute you start, all of those funds in your Roth 401k will begin to grow and build and compound tax-free. Now, here's the magic. The greatest money-making asset any individual can possess is time. And young people have more of it than anyone else. That's their secret weapon. So if time is on your side, wouldn't you want more time for it to grow, compound tax-free than to have a loan compound against you? That's what a deduction is. So for young people, lose the deduction. Take it from me, a recovering CPA. Forget the tax deduction. Go 100% Roth. It'll be tax-free for the rest of your life. Your money will be compounding for you rather than against you.
Okay, thank you. So let's.
Now, not everybody agrees with me, but that's my 2 cents.
So I want to sort of as we wrap this up, I want you to give us like 3 of your best tips for tax advice.
All right, I'll give you the first one. The biggest mistake everybody makes, and this whole book again covers all of that, is planning in the second half of the game. Most people know, and most financial advisors can help you make money. But when it comes to money that's growing tax deferred, as we started out, Rodney, that money is growing also for the government. So you can't just focus on how much somebody can make you. The key is doing planning in the second half of the game. How much of that are you going to keep when you'll need it most in retirement? I equate retirement planning to a football game. Football game has 2 halves too. There's a saying in football: the score at halftime is irrelevant. Give me the score at the end of the game, and then I'll tell you who won. It's the same thing with retirement. There are 2 halves. The first half, everybody knows about, I think. The saving, that's the 20, 30, 40 years you are building, saving, investing, accumulating. And then people hit halftime when they retire. And I know many people say, look at that. We have all the money we'll ever need for retirement. We've done it. They go in at halftime, they pat themselves on the back, and they think they're done. Meanwhile, IRS comes out, they're playing the third and fourth quarter, they're playing nobody, so they win. So the big mistake is not planning for the third and fourth quarter, the end of the game, getting that money out. And the Roth IRA is one way to create those plans, to start building, thinking about retirement, build with the end in mind. Think about the end, not just what you're accumulating, but think of having a plan to accumulate where you'll keep most, or if not all of that money tax-free, if possible. You've got to plan with the end in mind. I was in Atlanta a few years ago, and I happened to be walking around downtown, that Peachtree area, if you know where I mean. And I forget the author's name. Gone with the Wind. Margaret Mitchell wrote Gone with the Wind. I think it was 1935, so it's 65, 20. So it's like 80 some odd, 85 years ago, 86 years ago, it was written. But what I learned when I went to the house and read more about it, do you know that book, Gone with the Wind, it took her 10 years to write that book. But what I didn't know, which I learned then, she wrote the last chapter first. She wrote the end first. She began with the end in mind. Ever since I learned that, I equate that with retirement planning. You have to begin with the end in mind. What are you trying to accomplish? If you realize you want the most money and more of it tax-free, you'll start planning and saving a different way. You don't need the other tips. That is the tip. That is the single best tip, to plan with the end in mind. And obviously, offshoots of that are going to Roth IRA, or even saving outside of retirement accounts and more tax-favored accounts, maybe like permanent life insurance, also tax-free.
Okay.
I love tax-free. You see my bias? You know why I love tax-free? Because you keep more of your hard-earned money. You know, in this day and age now, our politically charged environment, whenever I do programs, and I can't wait to get back out on the road again, and I will soon, but every time I talk to an audience, I bring everybody together, because when I talk tax-free, everybody's with me. Everybody wants to keep more of their hard-earned money. So I think tax-free retirement planning is the one thing that can bring this whole country together. Everybody agrees on that?
Okay, well, thank you so much. We're talking with Ed Slott, author of the New Retirement Savings Time Bomb. Website is irahelp.com. And why don't you give me your social media, your Twitter?
They can get that online. The main thing is to get a plan, to listen to Rodney's program over and over again. What we talked about here, if you just came in at the end, maybe I gave you the secret to the New Retirement Savings Time Bomb, whether you get the book or not. I gave you the secret to have more, keep more, and make it last. You heard it here on the Rodney Brooks program. So listen to this over and over again. That's my tip. You can get the book, you can go to my website, but if you listen to what we discussed here, it will change your life financially. That's for sure. So thank you, Rodney, for having me on.
Okay, and thank you for taking the time to talk to us. Hope you have a great rest of the day.
You too.
All right.